You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Concept Show. Introducing my host, Mr. Paul Rook. Sorry, I took well over there.
Good evening. Yeah, you did, didn't you?
Sorry, I got carried away.
Okay, well, welcome to the Paranormal Concept Show. I want to welcome my host, Greenaway.
Good evening. God, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what you get for doing live shows.
Gets me all confused. It's not good.
Well, it's not that difficult to confuse you.
Not really.
How have you been this week?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. Yeah, well, good. Can't say that about the rest of the presenters on Parasearch at the moment.
No, I know. What's going on with them? I think it's the curse of Sage.
Oh, we're going to have to start calling it the Curse of Sage and banning all the Parasearch presenters from going. I think they'd kill me. I think they would literally kill me.
I think they would. Yeah. Yes. So, yeah. But today, we've had a long day today, Richard.
You have? You've been off on your travels, haven't you?
I have, yeah. And we ended up at the Poltergeist House.
You did, and we are actually live from the Poltergeist House, the Haunted Objects Museum in Rotherham. Big shout out to Lee and Lindsay Steer. Thank you so much for allowing us to do this. We're also joined in the studio tonight by somebody else who has investigated the place as well, Mr. Liam Kutkovic. Good evening, Liam.
Good evening, Kerry. Good evening, Paul. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. Knackered already. But I'm looking forward to tonight, though. It's going to be good.
It is. Now, let's give everybody a little bit of background about how this came about, because it is no surprise to anybody that I've been quite critical regarding the Poltergeist House or the Haunted Objects Museum. In a previous show, we were talking about new locations, and this happened to be one of the new locations we were talking about. It wasn't specifically aimed at the guys, but it did come up. And some of the things I said weren't received particularly well, were they, guys?
No, you were nasty. You were downright nasty.
Apparently I was nasty. Now, as a station, we do actually pride ourselves on being impartial to any situation or any affiliation or group. You know, we try and keep a open mind in regards to the field. So, obviously, off the back of some of the social sagas that carried on, Lee and Lindsay were talking to Paul, and they talked to myself as well occasionally, regarding actually going and visiting. And we said, why not? Because at the end of the day, why shouldn't we visit places? Just because some people like the group, some people don't like the group, you know, remaining impartial, you've got to go and check it out, right?
Absolutely. And, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just another location that's popped up. And, you know, if we can visit the places and let people know what it's like, unbiased.
Unbiased, or not give it of what it's like. But, you know, what we discovered if we go to these places, I mean, we've done it with other places before, and it's something we're going to continue to do, just, you know, to give people a background. How many years have you been investigating, Paul?
Oh, God, 15 years.
Liam?
Myself, I've been investigating 18 years.
Richard?
Myself, I'm relatively new to the investigation scene, but I've had an interest in this for a fair few years, as you probably know. But investigating, I would say, sort of like ever since the start of Parasearch Radio, really, sort of out in the field proper.
Mm. So we've got quite a lot of experience amongst the guys who go out investigating, and you know, it's nice to, I agree with you, Liam. It's nice to get a flavour of the locations that are out there sometimes. And it's a criticism actually that was levelled at me on a couple of projects that I've actually researched quite in depth, was that I haven't actually visited the places. And is that a fair criticism?
See, I don't think you need to go to a place to be able to research it. I mean, there's plenty of people that, I don't know, they're experts on Mars. They haven't been there, but they've researched it. Like, it's the same thing, really. You don't need to go to these places to learn about them, to research.
Well, I think that too, obviously, because I don't get out much. But, that's my opinion too. And I find just as much interest from doing the research side of things to actually doing it. And I think one thing that I think people overlook with me is I do have experience. I've not always just been a researcher as per se. I have actually been out in the field and done it. And I've worked spiritually for a heck of a lot of years and have a wealth of knowledge on that topic too. And actually work with energy in that way all the time, because I do the other side. So I think people make assumptions on other people without actually realising a true backstory.
Of course they do.
So that's true. But Lee and Lindsay do seem to take a heck of a lot of criticism from the field in regards to basically any projects they take on, whether it's, the Haunted Objects Museum, or whether or not it, some of their research, not research, but their investigation methods and stuff like that. So is that, I don't understand sometimes why that is.
I think, as we said before the show, when you asked about why Lee might get stick where, say, for example, Neil Packer at the Haunted Antiques Research Centre doesn't. And I said, I think it could just be down to the wording, because the Haunted Antique Research Centre implies that you go there, you do some research on the objects that they've got there. They might be haunted, but then they might not. It's just down to your own individual research. Where at this place, you've got the Haunted Objects Museum, which implies that all the objects are haunted. But obviously, having spoken to Lee Steer earlier on today, he said there's obviously a few objects that have got some backstories according to people that have given him the objects, but they're not always confirmed or looked into. And there's a lot of stuff here as well that is literally just for effects as well. So he doesn't. When you come in, he doesn't tell you that everything here is haunted.
No, but he never has done, in all fairness. Lee is quite sceptical-minded, isn't he? And he always says, allegedly, he will never turn around and say something's definitely haunted.
No, and I think it's just down to the wording that people would jump on the bandwagon, and that's possibly why I think Lee might get a little bit more grief than others. But at the end of the day, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to come and give these things a go and make your mind up for yourself. Don't listen to other people.
Well, and I say thank you again to Lee and Lindsay Steer and the Ghosts of Britain crew for allowing us to have access to the Haunted Objects Museum for tonight. Big shout out. Thank you so much. It's really appreciated. So, guys, you've had, how many hours have you been there now since you arrived?
We got here about 4:00, so 5 hours.
Yeah, we arrived, as Paul said, about 4-ish. We messaged Lindsay, and she said, when she'll be down in about an hour, because they're over in Sheffield. So we went out and just got some supplies in from the local supermarket across the road, and we met them back here. And they brought us in, and they said, do you want us to sort of show you around, or do you want to sort of go in blind? And me and Paul, we don't really mind sort of knowing what's what. And and they gave us a thorough sort of guided tour of the place.
Yeah.
And they're very honest about where the objects are, which ones have been donated, and some of the backstories on them, and the ones that are there for just aesthetics. You know, they say, "Oh,
Yes.
that's just we bought that just to make the room look, you know, more in theme with the main object that's in there." You know, those things. And there are some interesting objects in there now. On the Parasearch Radio group page earlier on, you did a walk round of the location.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel it's got more scope to go. I think, you know, as they grow and people send more items to them or they come across them or whatever, however items seem to find. That is one thing I would say is when we do get a centre, like some of the museums around, some of the object centres around, they do seem to gravitate other objects to them that have alleged activity to them.
Well, that's right, Kerry. I mean, sort of Lee and Lindsay were saying, you know, sort of they've got a core set of, from what I could gather, they've got a core set of objects which they've personally collected, but it's sort of like snowballed from there. I mean, from what I could gather, and most of the stuff that's coming to them now are donated from their sort of like viewers, fans, or whatever. You know, there's stuff turning up every day, and Lindsay was saying, and they're not sort of too sure the backstory. So, and some will come with quite, you know, sort of, oh, my family, you know, we think this or this, but others will just turn up. But they're very honest, and they will just present what they've been told and place it in their museum and just leave it for others.
And I think that's quite important as well, because then as an investigator, you can go away and investigate the provenance given with that piece, that object. So then, you know, we can then investigate it. If it does come back that that's rubbish or there's another story to it, or backstory, then we can offer it to Lee and say, look, this is what we found out about it, not what you've been told. So again, it's a good place for research, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now there is a poltergeist story linked to the location, isn't there?
There is, but he didn't really touch on that too much. He did show us the room where the activity was supposed to have happened, but that's all he really went into about it.
Okay.
But again, you know, it's just one of those, I think, stories that we could go in and research, I think.
Well, around that time, I did kind of try and look into it. It seems to be a very localised story in Rotherham. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying it seems to be a very localised story in Rotherham. But then I'm not being funny. There's a flat in Southend that's got a massive poltergeist story attached to it. I don't know how much evidence there is in regards to anything else, in regards to that story. So it's very difficult sometimes to pin down facts, isn't it, on things like that from an external perspective. Now, right, you three boys, you two are there, and we've had Liam, who's investigated before. You spent 5 hours there. Liam, you've already investigated the place overnight, I'm assuming. How is the feel of the place?
For me, I think at the moment it feels quite flat. There isn't much going on. We've tried various experiments. Richard has got a parabolic microphone, and he was going around all the paintings earlier to see whether or not he could pick up voices and stuff from the paintings. And he did pick up some voices from the crying boy. But I said to him, after 8 o'clock, try it again, because next door's in. So it could be, because it was the crying boys hanging on the chimney breast. So we just figured that the chimney on the other side of the wall, because they obviously normally do them square, don't they? And then they share it between two buildings. So you can hear their conversations. And 8 o'clock, we didn't get any noises whatsoever. So we tried. We tried different experiments, and we haven't got anywhere really. But I mean, we was trying them about 8 o'clock, so like 7, 8 o'clock. So it was still early.
Yeah, Richard.
So the energies can still build up.
Yeah, as Paul was saying, with the experiments with the parabolic microphone, they do seem to have calmed down now. As the general sort of exterior environment is quietening down, the noises and the voices that I was getting from, like, the painting, which is hanging on a chimney breast, do seem to have actually ceased now.
Okay, so that's a possibility, and that's just early indications. What did it feel like for you, Liam, when you went in there with your team?
So for us, it started off very quiet. Energy seemed quite low. But then as time went on, the actual energy built and got stronger. So we found more activity around from about 11 onwards, 11 at night onwards. And that continued right through until about 5 o'clock the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
So it does seem to kick off a bit later.
Yeah, it seems to. Yeah, that's what we got. We found more activity in certain areas as well, certain rooms, which we was discussing before the show. And certain rooms are good for certain pieces of equipment as well.
Yeah, I would agree with sort of like Paul, since I've been here. There is nothing. I'm walking around the property up and down the stairs and stuff, and I'm usually a bit wary about places, but this place just seems like any other sort of general occupied sort of area. There's nothing on particularly that's sort of spiking my anxiety or anything, but sort of listening to Liam and stuff, it will be interesting to see what happens as the evening progresses. And if anything sort of does start to happen, I would probably be expecting it to be later. I think this sort of property during the day, you probably would not get a lot from it.
It's difficult during the day because you've got so much environmental pollution, haven't you, around, what with people, when the road is busier, and you can't. It is difficult. Some locations you can do during the day and know that the external environmental pollution is minimal, but this particular location, I would say, it's great to visit, but not necessarily rely on any of your findings, perhaps.
The actual property fronts onto a main high street, basically, and the back of the property backs onto like industrial units, from what I can make out. There's lots of workplaces around here as well. So, yeah, you probably would have to wait till later on in the evening for it to sort of like your external stuff to actually quieten down, to sort of like take a closer look at what may be going on here.
Do we agree with that point, guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sitting at the moment. I'm sitting in the, I suppose, which would be the shop front, and it's really noisy. I can hear the traffic whizzing past at the moment. So it's still quite busy out there.
Liam?
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. The external pollution is quite high, but then obviously as the night goes on, obviously things get quieter because people won't be around as much and there won't be as much traffic. So I believe that's why we got more activity through the night rather than actually, during the early hours, and the starts of the day sort of thing, late hours and starts of the day.
Yeah.
There is one thing I will say: this building is a sound building. It's not falling down in any way. It is quite a sound and constructed building. I mean, it doesn't, and even with the hustle and bustle from outside, it does not seem to sort of vibrate or move or anything. Not that I've detected anything like that. It's just mainly I've found the noise pollution coming in.
Okay, which is a factor, because we have that again, like when we've talked to people that have had like trigger objects roll on the floor and stuff like that, we've said, could it be to the road outside and causing a vibration that's moved the floorboards, that moves the object, that kind of theory. Because I know that when I have a big lorry go past my house does shake. But could it be, I mean, we're built on clay, on canvas, so it could be to do with that. The vibration, how vibration moves through that. I mean, I know I'm like in concrete and stuff, but it could be the base of, what it's built on that could cause the vibration. I don't know if anyone's looked into that. But anyway, that area is actually very solid ground. I will say that, when I looked into that area before, it's actually quite a good base, although it's a high mining community. The actual bedrock and that towns and that are built on tends to be pretty strong. So I don't know if that has any relevance, but it's just a thought, everybody. Right, okay. So 5 hours you've been there. Now, I've got to talk about some of the artefacts in the museum because they're fascinating. Some of them are absolutely fascinating, a lot of for aesthetics. The first one, obviously, I want to talk about is the Haunted Bride doll, because I did an interview with Lee Steer quite a few years ago now when he first got her, and it was just about to start its research on the Haunted Bride doll. Now, you did a dowsing experiment in front of that earlier on, didn't you, Richard?
Yes, it was just a very basic dowsing experiment. I'm relatively new to sort of like doing this, and I was sort of like just asking the basic yes/no questions. So I sort of set up in front of the bridal doll, and I sort of established that there was a spirit connected to the doll, and then I asked, was the spirit male or female? And it actually came back as male, which might surprise a lot of people. And then I went around sort of questioning, was the doll a reminder to this spirit, which came back as yes. And then I asked, was it a reminder of his wife? It came back as no. And then I said, was it a reminder of a sweetheart? And that came back as yes. And then I tried to nail down a time frame of when this connection between this spirit and this doll was made. And I managed to get it back to 50 years ago. It indicated 50 years ago when he made a connection, or this connection was made with this bridal doll, which would take it back to the late 60s, early 1970s.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I thought she was older than that. I'll be honest with you. I thought she was built. She was made earlier than that. But I don't know. That's something I don't know. But it's interesting though, isn't it, that you got a male adult linked to the doll, rather than what you would assume with dolls and teddies and stuff like that. You would assume it would be a child. But who knows, right? Did you pick anything up, Liam, from the Haunted Bride doll when you was there?
We did actually get some information from it, but we got completely, well, I wouldn't say completely different, but a completely different time period. We picked up around the early sort of between 1910 and 1920.
See, that's what I would have thought would be more accurate, but I don't know. It's something I would actually have to look into, or ask Lee and Lindsay, to be fair, if they managed to track down the manufacture date, because I know that was something that they were looking at back in the day when I was talking to that when I interviewed Lee. So it would be interesting to see what other teams. See, this is the thing with haunted objects, and this is the thing I've always said. It's not the fact that haunted probably is the wrong word. Maybe energy that's linked to it is a better word. So it's almost like a psychometry experiment that you're doing with objects. So it would be interesting to see how different people who have worked with any object, this would be, I would say, for an extended period of time, kept a log of what everybody had picked up, and to see if there were common themes coming through, or whether everyone was picking up loads of different things. That would fascinate me. And if you had the opportunity with an object to be able to trace it back from manufacturer to owner get it passed on to, and that's incredibly difficult with objects, obviously. I mean, it can be done, but that tends to be done with like really famous or, famous people that have, got objects and stuff like that more than the everyday kind of objects. But it would be fascinating case study if you could do that from point of manufacture through all the owners and to the point where it's ended up at the museum to then what everybody picks up on that.
I think that is probably the key to that doll. It's sort of, a lot of people are coming in just working with it purely on a spiritual basis. But I think a real good study on where it actually comes from, who manufactured it, that needs to be pinned down as well. And I think at the moment it's still sort of open for debate. I think a lot of people are more interested in sort of experimenting on the spiritual side of it. But I think if you looked and managed to find a manufacturer, sort of the job numbers associated with it and how many sort of models of it were actually made, because there is an actual identical model in the Neil Packer's Museum.
Right.
Yeah, and, so it's obviously part of a set or part of a factory run.
But they would have made batches of things, even the Steiff, is it the Steiff teddy?
Yeah, the Steiff bears,
They made hundreds and hundreds of them. It's just the fact that the main one that's the most expensive one in the world happened to be the only surviving model of that. So it's, nobody's denying, even with pottery and stuff like that you get, they would have made multiple batches of them. It's just the fact that it's the relevance of either the story, like you in the museum, you've got the painting, is it a painting or a picture of the Titanic baby? There's a story behind that. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So if you could just, the point of manufacture is just a starting point. It's like the entire history that's needed to be able to pin down, which is incredibly difficult to do. Paul, what are you hoping for from the museum tonight?
A little bit of activity would be nice. To be fair. Just to see whether or not we can get any results from some of the objects. And to see if we can elicit some sort of paranormal activity going on. But then that's what we do on every investigation anyway.
True. Liam, what was the most outstanding piece for you in regards to how your team worked? What one did you get the most activity from?
We actually got a lot of activity from Scarlet. Now, Scarlet is one of my favourite pieces. She's in the Sinister Room, and she was actually having a conversation with us through EVP, and she was answering questions and it was relevant as well. The answers were really relevant, and it was a constant flow as well of conversation. So it wasn't just like the odd word or anything. It was like full sentences, which is really interesting.
Yes, we will be we tried a brief experiment with her earlier, not with any results, but now sort of like the evening has progressed, and from going what you've been saying, Liam, and something I think quite possibly is the right direction is to wait till it gets a bit later and this place does settle and the environment around settles to see what we can actually sort of get from individual objects around the museum.
Now, when you did a walk around earlier, right? Before we went on to the live show, that we did a walk around again. From Richard did a live feed earlier on the Parasearch Radio group page, and then we had a quick nosy around before we went into the show again. Now, when you hit Scarlet, you were convinced that there were suites on the walk around, second walk around. 3 suites were in front of Scarlet, weren't they?
Yes. When we was up there the first time, the second time, I've been in that room 3 times since we arrived. And then when I'd done the walk around with you guys just before the show, well, we went in a few rooms and I took you into, and I suddenly noticed in front of the case containing scarlet, 3 sweets, wrapped, boiled sweets, which I hadn't noticed when I first, the first 3 times, whether I'd missed them or not or whatever. I'd done a live feed from that room, but unfortunately, I know you guys have gone back and had a look. When I went into that room, I didn't really sort of take much of an image of actual Scarlet. I brushed round to actually have a look at the Titanic baby picture, and I spoke about that. So this is one of those things. I mean, were those sweets there?
Well, we have managed to, or Liam has managed to take some screenshots of that actual moment where you pan round, because you talk about the Titanic baby, then you pan round to the picture on the wall, the upside down picture, and you sort of like skirt past Scarlet. But so on the screenshots, it does look like there are 3 blobs just in front of Scarlet, doesn't it? So we kind of think that they were there.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Which is a shame, because that would have been freaking awesome, wouldn't it, guys?
Well, you can say, I also spoke to Lindsay as well and asked whether or not there were 3 sweets there, and she said yes, there was.
Yeah.
Oh,
so debunked, I'm afraid, Richard. Yeah. You got yourself all excited over some sweets.
They're a humbug, and I don't like humbugs anyway, so.
I think after tonight you need to book yourself into Specsavers, maybe.
Well, yeah, these ones I've got are no good.
Obviously.
We can't call him Sherlock Holmes, guys, because he missed an obvious clue.
But again, that sort of goes into, due diligence when you look around, I missed it 3 times. I mean, it can happen to others. And many times?
I totally agree with you. And that is the point I'm trying to make here, is that you do have to be very aware of your surroundings. And, we've all done that. Or we've all kind of done that, Richard. I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, you silly boy. Because we've all done that, where you've overlooked something and then later on it's come to your attention. You think, was that there? Wasn't it there? Luckily enough, we've been able to actually look back at the footage and ask somebody else who knows the location to see if that happened. But say you're in just a hired location, it's not always easy to get that verification, is it, guys?
No, not always. No.
No.
Yeah,
So it is one of those things you have to be very aware about.
Yeah. So no, we tried various experiments anyway. So
the experiment I conducted I done one with the bridal doll, and I actually conducted an experiment here in the Crime Boy room, which is actually a very nice room. I actually feel quite relaxed in here. It's been done out very well. There's about 8 different pictures of the Crime Boy hanging up. So I've sort of done my dowsing experiment in here. So I sort of sat and I called out and I asked, was there a spirit in this room connected to one of the paintings? The answer come back as yes. So I went round the room, stood in front of each painting, and I called out, is it basically this painting? No. And as I went round all the individual paintings, they all came back as no, apart from the main painting in the room, which is the classic Crime Boy image that everyone actually knows, and it came back as yes. So I asked if the spirit attached to the painting was the subject of the painting, the boy in the painting. It came back as no. And then I asked, is the spirit attached to the painting the artist of the painting? And it came back as yes. So I sort of was trying to sort of like work around that parameter, and I asked, are the stories associated with this painting true? The answer came back as yes. And then I asked, is the painting resistant to fire? I literally just came straight out and asked that. And it actually came back as no. So those were basically the experiment I done in here as regards the crying boy.
And Lee and Lindsay have actually burnt one of these paintings as well, haven't they?
Yes, the actual remains of that painting are actually in this room. I'm actually looking at them now. There's about half the frame left, or a third, about a third of the frame, and a pot with what I assume are the ashes of the painting.
Have you tried anything like that, the remains of that painting?
No, I didn't actually notice it when I actually came in. I noticed it during the walk round, but I didn't actually douse in front of that. I was sort of mainly taken with the main painting that's above the chimney breast.
Yeah. I think what we'll do is a bit later when we do some of these experiments, we'll live feed them as well.
Yes, I think that would be the best bet. We will live feed, and straight after the broadcast, I will put up a gallery of photos on the Parasearch group page, which I took earlier. So just to give the listeners out there sort of like an idea of what it actually looks like, each individual room, with still photographs. So I'll put up a gallery of about 10 or so of those so they can sort of get an idea of what we're sort of like looking at. Because the live thing, will be more localised to what we're doing. But yes, definitely we will have to. I've got a tripod and stuff, and we can set up the camera, and we can set up the phone slightly off. It will save one of us holding it and try some experiments.
That's it. I mean, I don't know how many people Liam had in his team, but how many people was in your team when you was here before, Liam?
We've got 4 in our team.
Okay, because there's only 2 of us here tonight, so we was just wondering whether or not the energies would build to an extent where we do get lots of activity. We might get a little bit, I would have thought, but nothing.
I think you would actually get a lot of energy, even with just 2 of you, because the place, after a certain time, for me anyway, the place actually creates its own energy. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So it's almost like the building comes alive, are you saying, then, after a certain time?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say it does create its own energy because I'm not gonna ruin it for you. But you just be careful of certain objects at certain times, and just be very, very wary of just listen out for certain things as well, because certain things we caught quite a few things happening, but everyone was accounted for.
That sounds interesting, because you were saying earlier, Paul, sort of like through the sort of like the background noise, which there was, you were saying you were sort of hearing a few sort of knocks and
it was almost like bangs, and obviously it sounded like movement upstairs, but it was before 8 o'clock, so I can't definitively say that it wasn't next door.
Is there a cat? Has someone got a cat?
No, that was a police car going by.
Oh. It sounded like a cat. I was like, where's the cat?
There's a lot of those in Rotherham. Lots of sirens. But yeah, I couldn't definitively say whether or not it was actually in this property or the next door, because it was before 8 o'clock. Mm. But if it happens after, then
it becomes interesting.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's a psychological thing as well. I mean, this place is actually very well lit. It's it's dark outside and everything, but it's the lights and everything. It's a very brightly lit sort of building. So perhaps a bit later, Paul, if we sort of dim the lighting and stuff like that, whether that sort of trigger some sort of activity, or whether the atmosphere or the mood of the building will actually change. Excuse me. Coughing away here.
God, last time they went out together investigating, I had Paul all ill, and now I've got Richard choking on an investigation. I don't know, these pair. So, guys, I kind of missed some of that, but what are you planning on doing as the evening goes on? I mean, turn the lights out, definitely, because I don't know if you did you read my blog I've done recently about whether or not you should, investigate in the dark. It's actually bringing it down into one single vibrationary light thing rather than several. So turning the lights out is always a good option, possibly. What do we reckon on that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We'll turn out some of the lights because it is too bright. Even for me, I don't like too much light. So we'll definitely do that.
Right, now, you are going to be sleeping. Sorry to interrupt, but just before at this time is probably a good point to mention. We are actually running a poll on the Parasearch Radio group page regarding where Richard should bed down for the night. I'm not going to give you the results yet, so if you want to tell Richard where he's going to sleep, pop over to the Parasearch Radio group page and you will find the poll. I'm not going to even give you a hint as to where you are going to be sleeping just. Oh, dear. So, where are you going to focus your investigations?
There's been a few rooms and suggestions, like there is a room where you get a lot of EVP stuff, so we're going to look at doing some EVP work in there. The room with the board in as well, hopscotch thing painted on the floor, we're going to go and do an experiment in there. We're also going to pull out the mobile phone experiment again. Although we tried it earlier. Sorry?
Can I make a suggestion to you with a mobile phone experiment? Try and put the mobile phone somewhere in possibly either the demon room, sort of the back end of the house, and then actually sit in the basement. So then you've got like less noise pollution and things like that.
Yeah, we tried it in the sinister room earlier, and it was all because it was quite echoey in that room. You could hear my voice come back at the phone, but there was some sort of static in there as well, which almost would have sounded if you could quite easily say that it was responses, but I don't think it was because of the echoes and stuff. So we're going to try it in a few rooms that don't echo as much, just to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think perhaps possibly the first experiment we tried with that earlier, the phones, and as Liam sort of has hinted at, were probably too close together. They need to be far apart, and we need a fair bit of insulation between us, between two phones. And I think us down in the basement and the phone right in the far upstairs far room, like the demon room, would be a good way forward with that one.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Hello, chat room, by the way. I'm seeing your comments in the chat room. So thank you for joining us. Yes, the rooms do have lovely names. And Andy says, are you in my house? Laugh out loud. With the sinister room, the demon room, all the other rooms. I can't. Sorry, guys, I'm really not with it at the moment. Right. So yeah. So down in the basement. Let's talk about the basement, because that's again another area that's come under some criticism, because there's supposed to be a Dybbuk box in there. Now we know that they're a modern incarnation, a made-up incarnation kind of thing. What do you think about that?
The Dybbuk box, I've actually seen it, obviously. I don't know a lot about the stories behind them and stuff. I've just what I've learnt from listening from shows like yours, Kerry, and sort of like the general sort of consensus. It's basically the one downstairs in the basement is a box. It's sealed. It has a band around it. There's lots of wax sort of being run over it, and it just sits there. It's a box, I don't get anything from it. It looks the part, I must admit. It looks sort of and you can imagine with all the wax running down the side of it and stuff, it's certainly been made to look sort of that it might contain something unknown. But apart from that, we done our Ouija board experiment right in front of the box, and the board never came back with anything. I mean, that was quite an actual dead session down there. We was sort of like making references to everything in that room, but weren't getting anything back through the board. So, but again, perhaps a little bit later, we may be able to get something different.
I hope so. Because it was a long trip to get here. So yeah. I hope we do come away with something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's say we've only been here a few hours, Paul, and the night is yet still young, as they say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it does seem like a place that wakes up after dark, as I would say, which is actually quite a good thing, because if it was all happening in the day, everyone would be saying, oh, it's, environmental pollution and stuff like that. So, yes, you're right, you have to still consider that, but it's a lot less at night. So that's very considerate.
Well, yeah, for us anyway. But I am looking forward to later, and we will be sort of jumping on doing some live experiments on the group page when we sort of obviously finish this and work out exactly our plan of attack. And I'm sure you'll have a few suggestions for us, Kerry.
Well, I do want you. There is a scrying area where you can go and mirror scry in a darkened room with a curtain that blocks out any more light and stuff like that. I do want you to go in there and do that.
Yep.
Not Paul, it is. Last time I got somebody to work with an object in my stead, we ended up nearly having to call an ambulance. So I'm throwing Richard to the wolves on this one.
Well, I do have a general interest in scrying, as you know, Kerry. Yes, I'll be more than happy to stand in your stead. I mean, and I'll blame you.
You can't use your phone?
No.
You'd have to just do the experiment.
I'll just do the experiment and report on it afterwards.
Yes, that's the best way on that one. Liam, any other suggestions for the guys? Do you think they should be doing hopscotch themselves? God, that would be funny to see. Do that on a live feed, boys. I want you to see you doing hopscotch.
Through the floor.
Yeah, don't break anything while you're there.
I would actually suggest as well. Did you take any bells or anything?
We've got a singing bowl, Tibetan singing bowl.
We've got a singing bowl. Did you bring your cat bell with you, Paul?
No, but I have seen one down in the basement. There is a bell down there.
Yeah, and there's a ping pong ball down there, the obligatory ping pong ball. We'll have that as well.
Also, a good way of communicating as well, I found in there, is actually through knocks and bangs as well. So you've obviously got to look at the environment and things like that. Look out for the heating pipes, etc., floorboards, etc., and things like that. But if you can actually get a genuine knocking going as well, that is a good way of communication in that place. We found out that ourselves, and we've got some really interesting information from it. Sort of like not once for yes, twice for no sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. So, and also as well, I would suggest. Well, I would normally suggest it, but there's only two of you in there, so you probably couldn't do it. But human pendulum is pretty good in that place as well.
Yeah, I don't think that just the two of us, me and Paul, doing a human pendulum.
Me and you in the dummy in that demon room.
Well, we could always use the mannequin, I suppose.
She could be the pendulum.
Yeah.
Wow. That's all I can
Kerry,
say to that
is
one.
there any, apart from the scrying, Kerry, is there anything you think?
No, I think you've got it all covered. I would like you to do some burst EVP sessions in front of Scarlett, if that's, a good one. That would do. I'd like you actually to do the Haunted Bride doll. It is something that really interests me, that particular object. And I'm not sure why I'm so interested in it. Could it be the story that's behind it, the controversy that got built up surrounding that doll when the guys got it? Whether or not that's my interest in it, or whether or not it is something that maybe I'm possibly drawn to, I don't know. I would have to actually get hands-on with her to sort of like distill that down. One thing you do have to be very aware of is self in regards to any spiritual undertaking. So I do question my own motives, perhaps, with that one, as to why I'm possibly drawn to that one. I am very interested in. There is a rabbit, what's supposed to be a rabbit. Talk to me about that one.
Yes, down in the basement, you've got the divot box. You've got a few other sort of there's like a coffin, but Lee and Lindsay, these are just for aesthetics. Where I've done the divot box and stuff, but hanging. Ceiling basement. It looks like sort of just like a wax type of crucifix, which is quite thick. But Lindsay actually informed us that it was actually, they've been told that it's wax that encased a rabbit. So that, sort of, and looking at it, it certainly seems like it may be some sort of a folk ritual sort of object or something, perhaps something connected with witchcraft or something. This is something I would be interested to look into more.
Well, we have Andy Mercer in the chat room, and he is an authority on that kind of subject. So, and if you know of any, any spell or, workings in this way that would, why somebody would create this, a rabbit wrapped in wax, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So, Andy, if you know of anything like that, then it could be something that is just beyond our knowledge base at this moment in time. So it would be interested to find out about that. Very much so. Leading on to then, these kind of objects do seem to pop up into these museums or centres, I'm going to call them actually. These, witches' bottles with stuff in them, or you get, the totems and things like this that allegedly are linked to witchcraft and stuff like that. Is there a distinct energy field between something like that and something more modern?
Interesting. Liam?
I don't know, to be fair.
Or is it just a psychological suggestion because you think it's more witchy that then triggers you into thinking it's active?
I think that a lot of things are suggestive, especially when, you get these jars of stuff and they do it up and they put wax around it and, they make it look something it's not. And, I think, it can be quite suggestive.
Because it doesn't look like a rabbit, does it, when you look at it?
No, it doesn't look like a rabbit. There's, it's sort of not in an image of a rabbit, but they were sort of saying that there's a rabbit encased within this wax. As I was telling Paul and Liam, I will be posting up a gallery of photos after this show, which I took earlier, onto the group page, and all the various objects and the general layout of the centre will be there for everyone to peruse.
Yeah, well, I think there is something in there, but as to what it could be, I don't know. But as Lee and Lindsay said, they've been told it's a rabbit. I personally don't think so, because I don't think it's... I mean, I know rabbits are not that big anyway, but for the size of the crucifix, that rabbit would have had to be starved.
Yeah, but don't forget, mummified remains are totally different, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if it was just like the remains of a rabbit, then yeah, okay, it could be. But equally, it could just be a stick crucifix with wax around it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Andy says in the chat room, he says, wax can be used to seal a curse in. Maybe the rabbit meant something to the person who's been cursed. Oh, I feel a little bit like, what's that film, Fatal Attraction, going on there?
Yeah.
Now, and another issue that has been addressed in the chat room is there any correlation between the popularity of the Annabelle films, and the sudden rise of interest in haunted dolls?
Quite possibly.
I think there has, because obviously, you do get a lot of haunted dolls out there. And if anyone throws around the idea of a haunted object, the first thing that comes into people's minds is a doll.
Yeah, because they were the original haunted objects, weren't they? Dolls.
Yeah.
Now it seems to have migrated across a whole, as you would say, Kerry, a whole plethora of other inanimate objects and stuff.
There's one room in this place dedicated to dolls, same as the Neil Packer's Research Centre. There's a whole room dedicated to dolls.
Yeah.
That just says it all, really. And, I mean, there are plenty of other objects out there that are haunted or used as, like, for curses and black magic and various other magics and whatnot. So...
Well, the museum of Bowcastle, the Witchcraft Museum in Bowcastle is supposed to be incredibly active, except they won't allow investigators in there. There's been some strange phenomena, and that is purely for that kind of artefact. So it does sort of leave the question, doesn't it? Is it intention that's put onto an object, regardless of age?
I mean, I've been to the Boscastle Witchcraft Museum every time I've gone to Cornwall. And again, it literally is full of, obviously, witch artifacts. And it does give you that whole sense of dark magic and, obviously, witchcraft as it not being good stuff. But obviously, I know that there's good witches and white witches and hedge witches and witches.
I think that's a more modern thing as well, in all honesty. The various names you can give to yourself as a witch, I kind of think that's a very modern incarnation of witchcraft, and just basically sort of indicates where you resonate best with, rather than actually making you something different because you're a hedge witch or a green witch or a grey witch or a black witch. Like you say, there's so many different definitions, but that is a modern occurrence. Now, again, Andy has addressed this again. He said little evidence of such things before the rise of Annabelle and the Warrens. Do you think the Warrens have got a lot to do with this rise in interest in haunted objects? Because when Andy started, and I'm not going to give your age away, Andy, but he's been in the business for a heck of a long time, there were no haunted objects, only places, only locations.
Yeah, and I can totally agree with Andy. I'm sort of same age as Andy, and back in the day, yeah, I mean, if you take the paranormal now to what it was sort of back when my interest first become, sort of heightened in the paranormal, I mean, it's totally different now. It does evolve.
It does evolve. Or does our understanding become greater, which opens our mind to possibilities that we weren't open to before? Maybe that's what we should be asking ourselves.
Maybe. Who knows?
Final words then, Liam. Well,
guys, just stay safe. Enjoy it. Embrace it as well. Embrace the history there, the building, and the items as well. Not all items are haunted, as we've kind of gathered out. But just honestly, just really, really embrace it and open your senses, because when you do open, you'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of like carrying on with the experiments. Got a few ideas from Liam and yourself, Kerry. Looking forward to actually doing those. And yes, and I'll finally find out a bit later exactly where I will be sleeping tonight. I've got a rough idea, I think.
Well, to give you a heads up of where you will be sleeping on the group page, the poll is coming in at, bear with me, let me find the poll again.
Okay.
It's been a few posts since I put that up. You are going to be in the basement, love.
Oh dear, lovely. Yes, and what I promise, that will be the last live feed we do from here tonight, or it might even be very early tomorrow morning, will be me bedding down in the basement.
Bedding down with Richard, everybody. Don't miss that one every...
That is a thought, yeah.
There's a thought for you guys to finish the show on. Paul?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to tonight, and hopefully the energy does build and we do get something. I mean, the place is fantastic anyway. It's definitely worth coming to have a look at, just to be as a visitor, and get to look at some of the artifacts that we've actually spoke about tonight and what else is in the media. But yeah, hopefully we get some activity tonight and we'll catch it on live feed.
Most definitely. On that note, we've actually come to the end of the show. Tomorrow evening, Haunted Histories with Penny G. Morgan. She is talking all things Jamaica in with the lovely Karim Bezan, I believe, possibly CJ. And then on Thursday evening, PSH Radio, Carl and Sam are back to their normal programming after their Sage coverage. And they've got Dakota Ladden in the studio with them. Hopefully everyone's well enough, that is. Fingers crossed on that one, everybody. Friday, the Dark Mirror Show, looking at all the topics and concepts and things that have gone in the paranormal field for the week. And then on Saturday, myself and Richard, we're off out again, and Daryl is coming with us too. We're going to the Nameless Art Conference that's being held at the Balmoral Centre in Westcliff-on-Sea. It is a fantastic day of speakers who talk all things occult and witchy, and we're talking bare roots and well-researched people too. So you can either join me live when I do my live feeds on the Parasearch Radio group page, or join me there, because there are very few tickets available. So go over to the Parasearch Radio group page. You will find the link. I will reshare it for you guys, just so you've got it. Because you still have a chance to attend that if you would like to. On that note, I want to say, guys, be safe. Whatever you do, make sure you're safe. I know you sometimes approach things with a bit of a cavalier attitude. And I always say to you, never underestimate things that could happen. Paul, over to you, because this is your show, and I've taken over again.
We don't do things like that, so we'll be fine. We're going to be awesome tonight. It's going to be fantastic. So, Liam, thank you for joining us on the in the call tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Thank you, Kerry, for hosting.
Right, you're welcome. You know, I do like to take over at times.
Well, I mean, it'd be good. It's good night from Liam and Kerry tonight, because me and Richard will be doing live feeds, so we won't say goodbye just yet.
Well, not just yet, no. So we see you guys over on the Parasearch group page a bit later, hopefully.
Okay, on that note, we all say good night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.